Quick, over here! Stay away from the window. If Mary spots you, it'll be trouble.
My son's teacher yelled, pulling me by both hands. I was taken to a separate room alone, having come to the elementary school for my son's class observation. Panic set in as the teacher whispered something unbelievable to me. My name is Mary, 35 years old. I have a husband, Joe, who is 2 years older than me, and a 10-year-old son, Jim. Joe and I bonded over both being former track members and got married. We're happily living as a family of 3, but I've always felt a bit off about my husband's family since we were dating. When my husband and I attended a family meeting, my mother-in-law, Susan, greeted us lightly with, "Ah, thanks for coming," and quickly went to the back of the house. We were allowed in, but my in-laws showed no interest in us, talking only about themselves. Susan mentioned, "We run our own business, and Ben's going to have a baby soon." I'm so happy. Ben is my husband's brother, apparently planning to take over the family business. Father-in-law Tom was also excited, saying, "We have to take care of the important successor." The conversation continued to revolve around Ben. I focused on smiling and nodding. After we got home, Joe apologized, saying, "Mom and Dad didn't mean anything by it. They're just not interested in anything besides the store and my brother who's taking over. Sorry if it upset you." I had a hunch, and it was confirmed. I reassured Joe, saying, "It's okay. It was easy since I didn't have to answer many questions. Even after marrying and having Jim," she said. "I'm too busy looking after Ben's child right now, so sorry, I can't help. Moreover, I think Ben's child will turn out better, and I'm not interested, so please don't contact us anymore." I never expected my in-laws to take care of Jim. I just wanted to inform them about their grandchild. Disappointed, but I thought it was better than them interfering too much, so I let it go, focusing on living happily with my husband and son. However, as Jim grew and started elementary school, he began to say, "I want to meet Grandma." My in-laws had been prioritizing Ben's family, leading to a sort of estrangement due to favoritism among grandchildren. I tried contacting Susan once, but the response was the same. She sternly told me not to contact them again, and we never got to meet. My parents, including my brother, cherished Jim greatly. Jim lost interest in his grandparents and stopped asking to see them. Just as we were forgetting about my in-laws. Out of the blue, they called. I kept their number just in case, thinking it was an emergency. "It's been a while. How are you? How's Jim?" I answered to hear Susan's irritating voice. Chilled, I replied, "What do you want? If there's nothing, I'm hanging up." Then Susan said, "Actually, Ben cheated and got divorced. His wife took the kids and left. Ben is popular with women. A little cheating should be forgivable, right? Mary, I'm sorry we haven't paid attention to Jim until now. We'll make him the successor to the store, so come visit us." Confused by the sudden change of heart. "That's impossible. What are you talking about now?" I firmly responded. Then Tom took the phone, saying, "We're saying we'll take care of him from now on. Just send Jim over." I hung up out of fear. There were no further calls, and I immediately consulted with Joe when he returned from work. Joe assured me, "No need to bother with them. But let me know if anything happens." We decided that Joe would drive Jim to school from the next day. Then, one day, an invitation to Jim's class observation arrived, and I decided to attend. Walking to school that morning, a man suddenly called out from behind, "Fancy meeting you here after such a long time." Startled, I turned around to see Ben. I recognized him immediately from photos my husband had shown me. Ben, with a laugh, said, "I've finally found you." Frozen, I couldn't move from the spot. Ben continued, he shockingly proposed. After my ex-wife took the kids, support from my parents diminished. I'm still the heir, so they won't completely abandon me. So, why not divorce Joe and remarry me? At this point, I genuinely felt fear. There was no way I could agree to that, so I firmly told him, "It's impossible. If you have the time to probe into our family affairs, why not reflect on your own actions up to now? It's all the result of what you've done. Do you even realize how absurd your statements are?" But Ben, refusing to listen, followed me even as I quickened my pace. Despite being aware of our surroundings, he persisted. "Enough with this. If you don't want to lose the kids, listen to me. I'm the heir. It's safer than with Joe in the future." His persistence was too much. Since Joe had already gone to work and wouldn't be back for over 30 minutes, I couldn't ask for help. I considered calling the police, but didn't want to miss the school visitation for such an absurd reason. In a split second, I decided to ignore Ben and run. Fortunately, it was the day of the visitation, and the closer I got to the elementary school, the more parents were around. While running, I loudly stated, "If you can't see it yourself, let me tell you. Your affair is why your child went with your ex-wife, right? It makes no sense to ask me, your brother's daughter-in-law, to remarry you just because you want a son without reflecting on your actions. Please stop following me." This was to alert those around that Ben was dangerous, and to take precautions in case he caught up. Ben, with a look that seemed to say no more, hurriedly started to run. However, being out of shape, he struggled to catch up, visibly frustrated. Despite my fears from not having run since retiring from club activities, I managed to outrun Ben. Thankful for my low-heeled pumps, I felt relieved in front of the school. Although Ben took up my time, I made it to the visitation just in time. Too precious to waste time calling Joe, I left a message, planning to discuss and take measures when I returned. I looked forward to the visitation, despite everything. Arriving at school, the teacher welcomed and guided me, feeling anxious under the stares of other parents and children. However, the class started smoothly, and seeing Jim seriously participating gave me peace. But after the class, the teacher came to me to explain the stairs. Just minutes before I arrived, Susan had come to the school. Claiming to be Jim's grandmother, she asked for his classroom at the reception. Apparently, he said this to the teacher at the reception desk. The teacher, seeing my name for today's visit, questioned Susan's presence. "I'm Jim's precious heir. I thought I should attend," she began. However, the teacher responded, "I'm sorry, but we limit the number of participants. Today was supposed to be Jim's mom." Feeling dubious about Susan's sudden work excuse, the teacher tried to call me. At this, Susan started yelling, without answering the question.
"How terrible, Mary! Since you married, you've never let me see my grandson. I'm always at home, so why can't I attend the visitation? Why do I need Mary's permission to see my grandson?" The teacher was at a loss, but then a savior appeared. The teacher was at a loss until Jim, hearing the commotion, came out. "Who is this person? Are you okay, teacher?" he worriedly asked. The moment froze. "I haven't seen you in a while, so you've forgotten me. I'm your grandma." Susan approached Jim. Jim, disgusted, hid behind the teacher. "I don't know this person. My mom said she was coming today. So, please leave." He completely dismissed her.
Susan was left speechless. The teacher then advised, repeating the request to Susan.
Today is a special visitation that many have looked forward to. Please leave.
Facing cold stares from everyone, Susan seemed embarrassed to be there and was successfully ousted from the scene. I had arrived safely, but by then, it was already time to start the class, so there was no time to explain. I expressed my gratitude to the teacher and Jim for their help. Other moms asked if I was okay, showing their concern. During the brief wait, I spent time with them, and just as we were about to move to the room for the social gathering, the teacher dashed over to us again.
Mary, please come this way.
She called out and led me to a different room, not the one for the social gathering.
Don't go near the windows. Stay away. If we close the curtains now, they'll notice.
She warned, her serious expression making me increasingly anxious. I wondered if my son had done something to cause such a situation. Thoughts of what my son might have done to his friends started swirling in my head. The teacher quickly called Jim and us and said,
Please, I need you two to run away now.
I couldn't comprehend and asked,
Huh? What do you mean?
The teacher then revealed something shocking.
Actually, it seems that the woman from earlier has been loitering around the school entrance, and now it looks like she's wandering with her husband and their son, all three of them.
Though there's a security guard, they haven't done anything conspicuous, but the teacher feared we would be caught the moment we left the school. The teacher told me.
Initially, a man, who seemed to be the woman's husband, entered the school around the end of classes, claiming he was there to pick up Jim instead of Mary, who was supposed to meet with a teacher.
However, what followed this time's class observation wasn't individual consultations, but a social gathering organized by the parents. Furthermore, I had already informed the teacher that Jim and I would be heading back together. So the teacher immediately knew it was a lie when he looked around and saw Susan, realizing they were plotting together. It seemed she was holding them off for now.
Please run away now while you can, as I will handle things with that family.
The teacher told us and guided us to the back exit, where we thanked her and quickly left the school. However, I thought it was too soon to feel relieved, as it was a close call. I was sure Susan and her group would come to our house. Thinking I had to protect Jim at all costs, I explained the situation to my parents and left him with them. Just then, I received a call from Joe, who I had been messaging, so I informed him about Susan's group and asked him to come home as soon as possible.
I'm sorry. I've made things difficult for you, Mary.
Joe sounded apologetic over the phone. That evening, as expected, my in-laws, having realized that Jim and I had escaped from school, stormed our house. They knew our address because we had sent them a Christmas card at the beginning of our marriage. They were banging on the intercom and causing a disturbance with their loud voices, much to the neighbors' annoyance. Joe hadn't returned home yet. Being alone and feeling insecure, I pressed the record button on an old voice recorder for evidence. Knowing that audio alone might not be sufficient without capturing their faces. However, facing three of them, I had no intention of opening the door unprotected. Taking a deep breath, I approached the door and checked that the chain was on before opening it slightly. Through the barely open door, I could see my intimidating in-laws and Ben. As soon as I opened the door, Susan grabbed the chain and said,
How dare you leave without telling us? It's terrible that you won't even let us see our grandson properly. Why is the door locked? Open it.
I asked Susan.
How did you know today was Jim's class observation day?
To which Susan replied with shining eyes.
I heard you ran away when you met Ben this morning. To meet Jim directly, I thought I had no choice but to go to the school. But it's all because you wouldn't let us meet. I thought it was a sign from God when it turned out to be the class observation day.
I had no recollection of telling them where Jim went to school, but they must have followed the crowd of parents heading to the school for the observation day. Tom then added,
He's going to be the heir to our important family business, so give back our grandson.
Having dodged and evaded them until now, my anger finally erupted.
Enough is enough. I've tried to let you see Jim multiple times before. But you were only interested in Ben's son, and I even told you not to contact us anymore, right? It's Ben's affair that caused his son to leave, isn't it?
I confronted them with the recorded phone messages I had prepared for this day. Playing the recording, Susan's voice could clearly be heard saying to stay away because Ben's son was more important. Aya said,
Jim is currently with his grandparents, so you can't see him. Please, you're troubling us by staying here, so leave.
The in-laws were momentarily silent after hearing the recording.
Stop lying. Regardless of what happened before, we're here now, aren't we? You're lying about him not being here. We won't leave until you hand over Jim.
But soon resumed their loud complaints. They continued to berate us fiercely, and Ben, joining in, threatened,
I won't give up until you divorce Joe and remarry me.
I was terrified by Ben's incomprehensible demands. Just then, Joe arrived home. The situation worsened with Joe's return. He glared at Ben and demanded,
What did you just say to Mary?
The in-laws were cowering, but Ben, unfazed, countered,
A child needs a mother, right? If I remarry Mary, only the father would change. It would be an act of filial piety. Just write the divorce papers already.
Joe, unable to contain his anger, moved towards Ben but then shifted his gaze to a frightened Susan.
What are you doing here today? Why did all three of you come together?
In stark contrast to Susan, who fell silent under her husband's fierce glare, Ben started laughing.
First off, I'll hold Mary back and convince her to marry me. Then Dad and Mom were supposed to go to the elementary school and bring Jim home early from school. Never thought we'd actually get into the classroom observation.
It was Tom who shouted out before any of us could respond.
Why do you always have to say things like that, you idiot son? That's why you get caught cheating.
The next moment, Tom and Ben started glaring at each other, but honestly, I couldn't care less. Joe yelled,
Don't ever get involved again.
But, as expected, Susan and the others weren't deterred by that. While arguing with Joe, I called the police. The trio, who had been so bold, hurried away from the house the moment they saw the patrol car. While waiting for the police to listen to the voice recorder, I hurriedly contacted my parents. I had asked them to be cautious about the commotion and the surroundings when I left Jim with them, thinking they might actually go to my parents' house. Turns out, my hunch was right, and my parents and brother-in-law showed up at my parents' house. But the angriest of all, my father and brother, were waiting at the front door. The trio, who had boldly rang the doorbell of my family home, were speechless upon seeing my dad and brother, a judo enthusiast and a brother with a boxing background, and fled without saying a word.
At least they won't come near our house now. They might have run back to their own house or, still furious, headed to your house. Make sure you lock your doors.
My father guessed accurately. Just a few minutes later, the three who came to our house were easily surrounded by the police still nearby. Initially, my in-laws insisted that it was ridiculous for the police to show up because they hadn't done anything wrong. However, after the police clearly stated that kidnapping a child is a serious crime, they went pale. They apologized profusely through the door.
I was wrong. But I think it's better for you to marry Ben and leave your child with us. I have experience raising children, and Ben is the rightful successor of Tom's company. It's secure. It's not a bad deal, right?
They pleaded desperately, but after I refused, they got angry and tried to force their way into the house, only to be detained by the police. Having submitted all the recorded data collected over the years, a restraining order was issued against the three from approaching us. Exhausted but determined, we decided to move immediately. After having taken care of Jim so many times, I went to apologize to my parents and brother. "I'm sorry for causing trouble because of me." To which my father, mother, and brother replied, and they smiled. "It's okay. Mary, you're not at fault. We're just glad you're safe. Call us if you need anything." On the day of the class observation, I had screamed and run from Ben, causing rumors in the neighborhood that his wife and child had run away from him. People had heard about the commotion at my house and discussed how they tried to take Jim away, leading to their isolation. Once one person cuts ties, companies quickly follow suit, and Susan and her family's self-employment failed, eventually leading to their business closing. Ben, who had been proud to be the successor, got furious about the broken promise and apparently left his parents behind. Without jobs or a breadwinner, my in-laws struggled financially. Having saved little, Ben tried to make a new start, but he continued his affairs. The last time with the wife of an important executive, leading to a costly settlement. Truly, he was responsible for his own downfall. As for Jim, he ended up transferring schools. When I apologized, Jim said, "I don't want to see that person ever again, so it's okay," seeming relieved. The new school is easier to commute to, and he enjoys his new environment daily. Knowing he can meet his friends from the old school in middle school, he doesn't seem too sad. Today he talked about a new friend and what his teacher was like, which reassured me. We are enjoying a life without ties to my in-laws while watching Jim grow. I hope these peaceful days continue forever.
Be grateful that you're living with Jane.
I confronted my sister-in-law Sarah, who was neglecting the care of our wheelchair-bound mother, and she defiantly yelled back at me. Since living with Sarah, Mom looked pale and worn, seemingly shrinking due to lack of nutrition. When I was about to unleash my anger on Sarah, someone else came along. My name is Karen. I'm 29 years old, living with my husband Jack, who is the same age. Jack and I run a cafe together. Jack, a friend since elementary school, had always talked about wanting to open his own cafe since then. He even wrote that his future dream was to manage a cafe in our elementary school graduation album. Seeing him still passionate about the same dream as an adult, I strongly felt I wanted to support him, and that led us to start dating. After graduating from culinary school, Jack trained at a famous restaurant for several years. Meanwhile, I got a job at a popular cafe and learned about customer service. Together, we opened our dream cafe when we got married. However, the area where we opened our shop was competitive, and it was hard to attract customers at first. Didn't get many customers today either. Karen, no point in getting down about it. Let's just keep doing what we can.
You're right. Feeling down won't change anything.
No matter the situation, we always kept a positive attitude and continued to work hard, gradually increasing our regular clientele. We have a great relationship, not just as a loving couple but also as business partners. Jack is very gentle and kind, and I've always felt lucky to be married to him. Then, one day, my father passed away suddenly. Amidst my grief, I was very worried about my mother. That's because she had become wheelchair-bound after a traffic accident a few years ago. Until then, my father had been taking care of her, but now I was left wondering what to do next when my brother Mike contacted me. Me and Sarah will live at the family home and take care of Mom.
Really? Mike and Sarah?
Leave it to us. Mike and Sarah's offer to live with and take care of my mother at the family home was a huge relief. However, I had my concerns. Mike had always been self-centered and cold towards the family. I hardly have any memories of Mike being kind to me. I can barely recall ever seeing Mike being kind to our mother either. Sarah was another source of worry. Sarah is selfish and very assertive. She had bad-mouthed our decision to start a cafe, predicting it would fail.
Cafe management is doomed to fail, isn't it?
Stupid. Even when she visited the cafe, she complained.
This dessert isn't sweet enough. So, I'm not paying for it.
Despite having finished it completely. Given these circumstances, I was nervous about leaving my mother in their care, but it turned out Sarah quit her job to take care of my mother upon moving in. Honestly, I was pleased to hear that. It gave me some reassurance that she was genuinely dedicating herself to caring for my mother. Even if Sarah and I didn't get along, my mother seemed to have a good relationship with her. When the living arrangement was decided, my mother was very thankful to them. But since then, I've hardly been able to see my mother. I tried calling her mobile phone, but it seemed to be disconnected. When I called the family home, Sarah would always say it was inconvenient, making it hard to arrange a visit. Even when I went to the house, it was locked and my key wouldn't work. The locks had been changed without my knowledge. Since I couldn't see my mother, I decided to call Sarah again and plead.
Sarah, can I please come and see how Mom is doing? You're so persistent. We're busy with caregiving. If you come, it'll just be in the way. Really annoying.
She yelled and hung up the phone on me. A few days later, unable to bear it anymore, I decided to go to the family home with Jack. No one responded to the doorbell, so I used my key to the family home to enter. The house was a mess.
What is this?
It was shockingly cluttered, to the point it seemed impossible for someone in a wheelchair to live there. This is too much. Jack was also stunned. We hurried to my mother's room and knocked. Mom, are you there? It's Karen. Jack is with me too.
Karen? It's okay to open.
Hearing my mother's weak voice from inside, I gently opened the door. Karen, Jack, it's been a while.
Mom! My mother looked pale and her clothes were tattered, making her seem smaller.
The sight was so heartbreaking, I started to cry. Jack seemed just as shocked. Then Sarah returned home. Making a loud noise, she approached us. Who's here?
Karen! Why are you here without permission? I told you not to come.
I confronted the yelling Sarah.
Sarah, what's going on here?
What do you mean?
The room is a mess, and Mom looks so run down. What have you been doing, Sarah? Have you been preparing proper meals for Mom?
Sarah, unabashed and defiant, shot back.
Quiet! You should be grateful just to live together. I sometimes take care of her, so don't complain.
Preparing meals is a hassle, so I just make do with whatever. My anger reached its peak at Sarah's attitude, and just as I was about to lash out at her, came a voice from the entrance.
I'm home.
Mike had returned. I sought an explanation from Mike about the situation, but he only gave a look of annoyance and didn't answer.
Mike, are you listening? Didn't you say you'd take care of Mom? Was that a lie?
I vented my anger at Mike, but it seemed to have no effect on him. Finally, Mike snapped at me.
Shut up! If you have a problem, take Mom and leave.
Sarah, agreeing with Mike, sneered. That's right. Jane is no longer needed. just get out already. Here's Jane's stuff. Sarah threw my mother's belongings at me and Jack. Even the usually calm Jack seemed unable to contain his anger. Clenching his fists, Jack then suggested to me,
Karen, let's live with Jane at our place.
Jack, really? Thank you. I thanked Jack, then turned to my mother. Would it be okay if we lived together? My mother replied,
Of course. Jack, Karen, thank you.
And so, Jack and I decided to take my mother home with us. Until the end, Mike and Sarah kept saying,
Good riddance to the nuisance.
Exactly. Now we can live comfortably. Their vile remarks continued. My mother, while upset by Mike and Sarah's behavior, seemed grateful that they had lived together. However, parental compassion had its limits, and she made them promise never to involve themselves with her, Karen, and Jack again before leaving.
Both of you, promise not to involve yourselves with me, Karen, and Jack from now on.
Mother calmly told my brother and his wife.
As if we wanted anything to do with you. That's right. Don't bother asking. We have no need for you anymore.
They laughed mockingly at my mother. After moving in with us, my mother quickly regained her spirits. Though she lived in a wheelchair, she could manage most things on her own if she could navigate the wheelchair, except for meals and bathing. While caring for my mother and running the cafe was challenging, Jack's unwavering support made it possible for the three of us to live happily. We were relieved to see my mother's complexion improve significantly. I was troubled by Sarah's words about Jane being no longer needed, and it turned out that all of my mother's savings had been spent.
Not a cent left. Absolutely despicable.
I muttered, checking my mother's debit card balance. It seemed this had been their plan all along. They had no intention of caring for my mother, they were only after the money. I regretted not stopping it sooner, and my mother regretted not thinking it through. But now that my mother was receiving her pension, we had enough to live comfortably together. I never should have left Mom with those two. I want her to enjoy her life from now on. I made this promise to myself and went to town to buy something for my mother. Upon returning, I made a suggestion to her. Mom, why don't you try sewing or knitting again? You used to make so many things. I encouraged her to take up sewing and knitting, her old hobbies. I've already bought all sorts of materials. Look at all this.
Thank you. Maybe I will give it a try.
My mother was delighted and started working on her projects right away. Our house, with the cafe next door, made me happy to see my mother engrossed in her hobbies while having lunch in the cafe. Her face seemed to shine. She seemed like a different person than when she was living with my brother and his wife.
Look, Karen. I made this bag with this beautiful fabric. What do you think? It's wonderful. Mom, you're so talented.
My mother smiled happily when I complimented her. My mother has always been skilled with her hands, making skirts and dresses for me when I was young, which my friends envied. She even gladly made them for my friends. I was very proud of my mother. Suddenly, I realized that housewives living in the neighborhood began to gather around my mother. They all seemed to be enjoying working with their hands.
How do I sew this part? You sew it like this to make it easier. Look, like this. Wow, that's amazing.
It seems they were learning sewing and knitting from my mother. Thanks to this, the cafe was bustling with customers nonstop. My mother, who loves to chat, seemed very happy, and Jack and I were pleased to see her like this, while also sincerely enjoying the busyness. The cafe was always enveloped in a warm atmosphere, making it a comfortable space. A month flew by since we started living with my mother.
Good job today. It was really busy again.
It's all thanks to Jane. After closing the cafe, Jack and I started cleaning up. When we heard the door open, "Sorry, we're closed for the day," I began, turning around to see my brother and his wife standing there. "Mike, Sarah, what are you doing here?" I asked them coldly. "It's been a while. Looks like you're making a fortune."
This modest cafe is doing well, all thanks to Jane, isn't it?
It appears Mike and Sarah had heard about the cafe's popularity and my mother's reputation and decided to come.
There's nothing to discuss with you, so please leave.
As I said this, my brother and his wife became furious.
We want a share of the profits made thanks to Mom and her pension. Your cafe's success is because we handed Mom over to you. That's right. It's all thanks to us. Give us the money.
Their outrageous demands infuriated Jack, who retorted,
What are you saying? Your demands are ridiculous.
The argument escalated further.
Shut up. Just give us the money. Mom has plenty of pension money, doesn't she? Hurry up. We won't leave until we get the money. Hand it over quickly.
Their faces twisted in greed. My brother and his wife were screaming. Seeing their faces, Jack and I were disgusted and about to retort when my mother appeared.
Enough is enough.
When my mother spoke sternly, my brother and his wife trembled in surprise.
Mike, Sarah, you promised never to involve yourselves with us again, didn't you?
My mother's voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. Mike stumbled over his words.
Well, yes, but...
He seemed overwhelmed by my mother's furious presence. I had never seen my mother so angry before.
You've broken your promise, so I won't hold back anymore. What do you mean you won't hold back?
Mike asked timidly. Sarah's face twisted in fear.
I'm selling the family home. I am the owner, after all.
My mother's firm voice left my brother and his wife pale.
Wait, Mom! If you sell the family home, where are we supposed to live? That's too cruel, Jane. What are we supposed to do now?
Ignoring their screams, my mother looked at them with disdain and firmly stated,
My decision is final. No matter what you say, I won't change my mind. You're the ones who broke the promise. I already gave you your last chance.
My brother and his wife collapsed on the spot.
Can't believe this,
I said. It's your responsibility, isn't it? Please leave now. Giving them a cold look. But my brother and his wife, in despair, hardly moved from their spot. Both of them were muttering,
It's all over.
What's going to happen to us now? To them, Jack coldly said, If you continue to loiter here, we'll call the police. Not wanting to deal with the police, they finally started to move slowly and left the shop. Their departing figures lacked spirit, staggering as if they were about to collapse at any moment. Afterward, my mother really did sell the family home. She meant what she said. It seemed my brother and his wife thought that if they behaved, my mother would change her mind. They were furious, thinking it impossible for her to sell while they lived there, calling her a terrible mother for kicking out her own son. When they came to our house and caused a scene, we finally had to call the police for real. Being warned by the police seemed to have shocked them, as they haven't come to our house since then. They've been spreading rumors to friends and acquaintances, claiming they left a cruel mother and sister behind, even though no one asked. However, living with my mother, they had used her savings and pension for a lavish lifestyle, and couldn't shake off those habits, ending up in debt. Apparently, both had debts even before moving in with my mother, which only increased over time. Mike had gambling debts, and Sarah's were from buying luxury brands. They were irresponsible. Now without a home, they were forced into a poor lifestyle. Somehow they managed to contract an old, cheap apartment and are living a modest life there. I hope they take this time to reflect and reassess themselves. On our side, thanks to my mother, our dream of running a cafe is on track, and now it's not only the cooking that's famous, but it's become the best cafe in the area. We've been featured in TV and magazines, becoming a well-known establishment that attracts customers from all over. The cafe's cooking and my mother's sewing classes are often highlighted together. Customers continue to come specifically for my mother's sewing classes. With many students, my mother seems more joyful than ever, which makes me very happy. We want to continue protecting this beloved cafe as a close-knit family.